Oh no! He's falling!
The researchers set up cameras and sensors to record. Did they find anything?
These are reasons behind the vanishing of people. We found everything.
In the forests of Romania, there stands a bridge, and no one who crosses it has ever come back. That is how the legend begins. A simple path of wood and stone, half forgotten by maps, surrounded by endless trees that whisper when the wind moves through them. At first glance, it looks like any other old crossing, but the locals know better. They lower their voices when its name is spoken, and even the boldest among them will never step onto its surface. They say the bridge listens, that it remembers. It is hidden deep inside the Carpathian wilderness. Fog curls around its frame almost every morning, clinging to the railings as if the mist itself does not want to leave. The wood is dark, damp, and cracked. It groans under the weight of silence. Birds never perch on it. Animals never approach it. Even wolves, which roam fearlessly through the region, turn back when they smell the air near it. Old women tell stories of shepherds who vanish while searching for their flocks. Men whisper of hunters who never returned, their rifles later found leaning against nearby stones. Children, wide-eyed, repeat the tale of the boy who dared to step onto the bridge after being challenged by his friends. They all watched him take one step, then another, then a third, until the fog wrapped around his body like a living curtain. He was gone, his footsteps faded, and on the other side of the bridge, no child ever appeared. Generations have tried to explain it. Some call it a cursed place, built on land soaked with forgotten blood. Others believe it is a door, a passage not meant for this world. Priests once came, carrying holy water and prayers. They left their crosses nailed to nearby trees, warning everyone not to continue. Even they admitted something unnatural clung to the bridge, something that no prayer could drive away. But the story that chills villagers most is the one of the merchant. He was a man of great pride, a traveler who laughed at tales of curses and vanished souls. He arrived one autumn evening, his cart heavy with goods, his heart light with arrogance. The villagers begged him to take the longer road. He only smiled, saying he had crossed greater dangers in his life. That night, under a silver moon, he guided his horse to the mouth of the bridge. Dozens stood in silence, watching from the tree line. The horse trembled, refused to move, so the merchant struck it with his whip, forcing it forward. The cart's wheels touched the wood. The first creak echoed across the forest, then another. Each step of the horse sounded heavier, as if the bridge did not welcome them. People whispered prayers as the man and his animal moved farther into the mist. Then, something happened that no one could explain. The man raised his hand, waving back toward the villagers as if mocking them. They could all see him clearly. He was halfway across. A final step carried him deeper into the fog. For one breath, he was still visible. For the next, he was not. The horse, the cart, the man himself, gone. Not a sound followed, not a scream, not even the fall of wood. Only silence. When the villagers finally gathered their courage and approached, the bridge lay empty. No horse, no cart, no merchant. On the far side, the path stretched on like nothing had happened, but no footprints reached it. It was as if the bridge had swallowed them whole. Over the years, more stories grew. Travelers on foot, soldiers on patrol, entire groups vanishing in the same way. The bridge became a line that no sane person would dare to cross. Parents warned their children. Lovers warned each other. Wanderers warned strangers passing through. The forest could be walked, the hills could be climbed, but the bridge must never be trusted. Yet curiosity never dies. A curse is also a lure, and forbidden paths always tempt the bold. Some who disappeared were said to be seeking treasure, convinced that ancient gold lay hidden on the far side. Others were drawn by the idea of testing fate itself, proving they could go where others could not. But none ever returned to tell what they found. The bridge waits in silence, year after year. The mist thickens with ages, but it never falls. Time does not seem to touch it as it touches the rest of the forest. Even storms spare it. When thunder shakes the mountains and trees fall like broken matchsticks, the bridge remains, untouched, unchanged, watching. And those who live near it insist that when the night is darkest, when the air is thickest and the world is quiet, you can still hear faint sounds coming from its direction. Not footsteps, not creaking wood, but voices. Soft, distant, almost familiar. Some say they have heard names whispered, names of fathers, brothers, sisters who long ago vanished. A call, tempting the living to step forward, to follow, to join them. This is why no villager will go near after sunset. Children are locked inside, doors are barred, and fires burn in every heart to keep shadows away. Because once, long ago, a man claimed he saw shapes in the fog. Dozens of them. Silhouettes moving back and forth across the bridge. When he blinked, they were gone. But the sound of their whispers remained in his ears for the rest of his life. Every legend begins with a seed of truth, a path forgotten by time, a story passed from mouth to mouth, a place where something happened that should not have. The Romanian bridge is one of those places. It is not simply wood and stone. It is a wound in the earth, an opening that never heals. And those who cross are never seen again. But one story, more than any other, gave the bridge its reputation. It was not of shepherds or children or soldiers. It was a man watched by dozens of eyes, a man who stepped boldly into the mist, a man who mocked the warnings and vanished before a village. His tale spread farther than the valley, carried by travelers who told it in markets and inns. With every retelling, the bridge grew more feared. The idea that something could take a man before witnesses, with no trace, shook even the bravest. That is how the bridge of no return earned its name, a place where the laws of nature bend, where silence is stronger than sound, where paths lead not to safety but to oblivion. In Romania, people whisper of a bridge that does not belong to this world. To many, it is just wood and stone hidden by the forest. But to those who live near it, the bridge is more than a path. It is a boundary, a place where the land itself is cursed, where voices drift through the mist at night, and where silence holds a weight heavier than sound. The villagers call it cursed ground. They believe the bridge was not built by human hands alone, but raised upon soil soaked in ancient blood. Long before the bridge was laid, there were stories of battles fought in those woods. Armies clashed there, leaving the ground littered with the dead. Some say the earth drank their rage and sorrow, never letting go of the cries that echoed during those forgotten nights. When the bridge was built centuries later, it was placed directly upon that wound, and from then on, people vanished. In every house nearby, stories are told of the shadows that claimed the careless. A shepherd's son, who wandered too close to the railing, was swallowed before his father's eyes. A young bride, eager to reach her husband on the far side, stepped forward smiling, but the smile never reached her new home. And in each case, villagers swore they heard faint sounds afterwards, whispers calling in familiar voices, luring them closer. The dead, it seems, do not rest beneath that bridge. They wait. Not all accepted the legends without question. In the late 19th century, detectives were sent to investigate after a group of travelers vanished. The detectives arrived with notes, lanterns, and reason. They questioned villagers, gathered testimony, and recorded every account. The report spoke of strange cold near the bridge, sudden drops in temperature even in the warmth of summer. They wrote of animals refusing to step onto the planks, no matter how they were forced. They listened as people described the voices they heard at night, voices of loved ones who had disappeared. The detectives thought the stories came from grief or madness or the tricks of the mind, so they set out to prove the fears false. They crossed during daylight, measuring every plank, writing down every detail. They expected to find rotting wood or a hidden cave below. But when one detective leaned over to study the supports, he swore he saw a pale hand pressed against the underside of the bridge, a hand that reached upward from the dark water, fingers spread wide, grasping as if to pull him down. His colleagues saw nothing, yet he would never return to the bridge. His report ended there, his words growing shaky, his sentences unfinished. He resigned his position weeks later. claiming he dreamed of that hand every night. Priests came too, brought by fear that the ground was unholy. They stood with crosses raised high, muttering prayers in Latin. They sprinkled holy water over the planks, chanting louder as the mist grew thick around them. For hours they fought against what they believed was a force of evil. Villagers watched from a distance, clutching their rosaries, hoping the priest would banish the curse. When the prayers ended, the priests nailed crosses into surrounding trees, declaring that none should step onto the bridge. And though they did not speak of what they had felt, their pale faces told the truth. They had sensed something too heavy, too vast, too ancient for human voices to silence. They left before nightfall and never returned. For the villagers, the priest's silence confirmed what they already believed. The bridge was not a place to be saved. It was a place to be avoided. But still, the bridge stood, and still, people disappeared. And with every disappearance, the whispers grew louder. In the stillness of the night, families reported hearing the voices of those they lost. A wife swore she heard her husband calling her name from the darkness, though he had vanished months before. Children said they heard their father's laughter outside, though he had been gone for years. Even the strongest men admitted hearing the cries of loved ones, tempting them to step closer, to follow. The voices came soft, gentle, almost loving. They sounded real, too real to ignore. But the villagers knew the truth. The voices were not calling with love. They were bait. And then one discovery changed everything. Near the edge of the bridge, hidden beneath moss and stone, a villager found a diary. Its leather cover was cracked with age, its pages yellow and fragile. The writing inside was faint but clear. The diary belonged to a traveler who had passed through the region centuries earlier. His words spoke of curiosity, of the rumors he had heard in taverns and inns. He described the villagers warning him away, their eyes filled with fear. Yet his curiosity grew until he decided he must see the other side for himself. The entries followed his journey. He wrote of forest silence, how no bird sang as he approached. He wrote of the mist that seemed to rise from the earth itself. He wrote of the bridge, describing it as older than the trees, its planks carved with strange marks he could not understand. He confessed he felt watched, as though unseen eyes followed every step. He wrote of whispers brushing his ears, voices of his family, though they were far away. Still, he pressed forward, determined to prove the legend false. His final entry was written in haste. The words were uneven, the ink smeared. It spoke of the other side, of a place not like this world. He wrote a sky that glowed red, of air that felt thick and heavy, of shapes that moved in the distance, waiting. He wrote of hearing countless voices, all speaking at once, calling, laughing, crying. He said the bridge was not just wood and stone, but a passage, a doorway, a trap, and then the word stopped. The last line ended mid-sentence, cut off as if the pen was torn from his hand. No further entries were written. The diary ended there. The villagers who found it refused to keep it. They claimed it carried a weight, a presence, as though the words themselves were cursed. They buried it again, far from the bridge, but not before its story spread. And once more, the legend of the bridge grew darker, deeper, more impossible to ignore. For those who believe, the bridge is no longer just a cursed place. It is a wound between worlds, demanding offerings, feeding on the living. For those who doubt, the diary remains unexplained, its final words frozen in time, an unfinished sentence that no one dares complete. Even today, when the mist thickens over the Carpathian woods, villagers stay inside, whispering prayers to keep the voices away. They know what waits in the fog. They know what stirs when footsteps fall upon that bridge. And they know the shadows do not rest quietly. They hunger, they call, they wait, and in the silence of night, when a villager hears the voice of someone they lost long ago calling their name from the darkness, they do not answer, because they know it is not the dead who speak. It is the bridge itself. During the chaos of war, there are always tales of soldiers who never return home. Some fall in battle. Others are lost to hunger or disease. But in Romania, there's a different story. A story of patrol that set out across a lonely bridge in the forest and vanished without a sound. It was a dark winter night. and the land trembled under the weight of conflict. Armies moved like shadows across the Carpathian valleys, desperate to hold their ground. Villages lived in fear, caught between marching boots and gunfire. In one of these valleys stood the bridge, the same bridge that locals refused to cross. To the soldiers, however, legends and curses mattered little. Orders came first. The patrol was small, a group of men chosen to secure the forest path. Their task was simple: cross the bridge, hold the ground beyond, and report back before dawn. The villagers who watched them leave begged their commander to choose another way. The warnings were dismissed with laughter. To trained soldiers, the bridge was nothing more than would cross a river. They carried rifles, bayonets, and torches. Fear was for civilians. As the patrol marched into the night, torches burned against the mist. The soldiers' boots struck the ground in rhythm, each step sharp and certain. Villagers stood far back, hidden among the trees, their prayers swallowed by the fog. They saw the men approach the bridge, their torches casting long, trembling shadows across the wooden planks. One by one, the soldiers stepped forward. The bridge groaned under their weight, but it held. The sound of boots and iron echoed through the night. The glow of the torches floated deeper into the mist. From the distance, the villagers could still see their light moving steadily across. Then something changed. The sound stopped. The sharp rhythm of boots fell silent all at once. The torches flickered, dimmed, then seemed to sink into the fog. For a moment, faint shapes were visible, the outlines of men, rifles raised, moving in formation. But as the fog thickened, those shapes blurred, stretched, and disappeared. Then nothing. The villagers waited in terror, straining to hear footsteps on the far side. No sound came. The forest returned to silence, broken only by the wind moving through bare branches. The patrol had vanished. At dawn, a search party was sent. Soldiers combed the banks of the river, scoured the forest floor, and studied the bridge. What they found chilled even the most hardened men. On the planks of the bridge, in neat rows as if carefully placed, lay the boots of the missing soldiers. Every man's boots, side by side, with no sign of struggle, no sign of violence, and no bodies. It was as though the men had been ordered to remove them before stepping into the mist. Yet no soldier would leave his boots behind in enemy territory. The commander raged, demanding answers, but there were none. Rifles and gear were gone. The men themselves were gone. Only their empty boots remained, mute witnesses to whatever had taken them. Whispers spread quickly among the soldiers. Fear grew like a sickness. Some believed the men had deserted, though none could explain the neat arrangement of the boots. Others believed the bridge had claimed them, as the villagers had warned. The story spread from camp to camp, and soon even officers avoided mentioning the bridge aloud. What made the story even darker was the effect their disappearance had on the war itself. That patrol had been sent to secure a critical path, one that could decide the safety of an entire regiment. Without them, the path fell silent. Enemy forces advanced through the forest unchallenged. A battle was lost that might have been won. Lives were taken in droves, and the course of the war shifted in that valley. All because a patrol vanished on a cursed bridge. The military tried to bury the truth. Reports were sealed, witnesses silenced. Orders were given to stay away from the bridge. It was surrounded, marked, and declared forbidden. Guards were posted to ensure no soldier crossed again. Official records claimed the patrol was lost to enemy ambush, but those who had seen the torches vanish knew the truth was different. The villagers, however, could not ignore what they saw. For years after, strange lights were said to hover above the bridge at night. Not flames, not lanterns, but ghostly glows, drifting through the mist as if torches were still carried by invisible hands. Some swore they saw figures too, silhouettes of soldiers, rifles slung across their shoulders, walking endlessly across the planks but never reaching the other side. Fathers told their children to patrol that marched into silence. Mothers whispered prayers each time the mist grew heavy, fearing the soldiers would come calling in the night. And the elderly shook their heads, remembering how the war might have been different if those men had not been claimed by the bridge. There are even darker tales told in hushed voices. Stories of travelers in later years who claimed to hear the sound of marching boots echoing through the valley at midnight. They said the sound grew louder as they neared the bridge, until it felt as though an entire army was moving past them. Yet, when they looked into the mist, the bridge was empty. Others spoke of hearing voices. Commands shouted in a language from the war, sharp and urgent, fading into whispers that seemed to come from the air itself. Some claimed to hear their own names spoken in the same tone, as if the vanished soldiers were trying to lure new victims to join them. No explanation was ever found. Historians have tried to dismiss the tale as rumor, a trick of wartime panic, a story twisted by fear and superstition. But the boots remain in the memory of those who live near the forest, neatly placed, waiting, as if the patrol had stepped into another world and left behind the last trace of their presence. To this day, the bridge is remembered not only as a place of curses, but as a wound in history, a place where men vanished and a battle was lost because of it, where torches lit the fog for the last time and silence swallowed an entire patrol, where the course of war itself was altered by a single night. And in the quiet of the Romanian forest, when the fog drifts low across the river, there are still whispers of soldiers marching, invisible, endless, lost. Their boots may remain on the bridge, but their shadows walk on forever. There are always people who cannot walk away from a mystery. No matter how dark the stories, no matter how many warnings are whispered, there will always be one who feels a need to uncover the truth. That is how the bridge drew in a modern investigator, a man trained not only in evidence but in history. Some called him a detective, others an archaeologist, but he was known best as a seeker of hidden truths. He came not for fortune nor fame, but for obsession. His name was spoken quietly among scholars, for he had solved puzzles others abandoned, ancient ruins, forgotten manuscripts, trails left cold for centuries. He followed them all until answers were revealed. And when he heard of the Romanian bridge where travelers vanished without a trace, he felt the pull of something greater than curiosity. He arrived with notebooks, recorders, and a mind sharpened by doubt. His first act was to speak with those who lived closest to the bridge, survivors in all but name. Though they had not crossed, they bore scars of knowing what had happened to others. The first was an old woman who lived in a cottage near the forest. Her hands shook as she poured him tea, and her eyes never lifted to meet his. She told him how her brother had vanished when they were children. He had been only 15, full of daring, eager to prove himself braver than the rest. One morning, he declared he would cross the bridge to hunt in the woods beyond. She followed him as far as the mist, begging him not to go. He laughed, kissed her forehead, and stepped forward. She remembered the sound of the planks beneath his feet, the creak of wood, the fade of his shape in the fog, then silence. She waited hours, days, even weeks. He never came back. Her voice cracked as she admitted she still heard him sometimes, calling her name in the night. The investigator noted every word. He wrote of her trembling hands, of the sorrow that never left her face. He reminded himself that grief can create ghosts in the mind. Yet a shadow of unease touched him as he closed his notebook. He spoke next to a man who had once been a soldier. His hair was gray, his shoulders heavy with memories. He told a patrol sent across the bridge during his service of how men vanished without sound. He admitted he was ordered to cross once, but refused. He said his refusal nearly cost him his career, but he did not regret it. His reason was simple. He had seen lights above the bridge, moving like torches carried by invisible hands. He had heard boots striking wood in perfect rhythm. Though the planks were empty, he knew if he set foot upon them, he would join the others. He warned the investigator to turn back, to burn his notes, to leave while he could. Again, the man of science wrote every detail, his pen scratching across the page. Yet doubt began to cloud his thoughts. He told himself these were only stories shaped by fear. But as he walked away, he felt a strange sensation of being watched. He paused, turned, and saw nothing but trees swaying in the wind. Still, the unease clung to him. The last interview came from a priest who had once been young and bold. He described the night he and two others had performed blessings on the bridge, carrying crosses and holy water. He confessed the truth the others had never spoken aloud. As he walked onto the planks, prayers on his lips, he felt something stir beneath his feet. Not wind, not water, but a presence. Heavy, endless, Aware, his prayers faltered. He believed it listened to him, mocking every word. He turned back before he reached the middle, ashamed but alive. His colleagues had pressed farther, but one collapsed afterward, pale and silent, never recovering. The priest swore he never returned to the forest again. The investigator's notes grew crowded. His handwriting grew uneven. In the margins, small phrases appeared that were not part of the interviews. Felt eyes on me. Dreamed of footsteps. Bridge calls even from a distance. He tried to focus, to remain rational, but the shadow of the stories had already crept into his mind. Nights grew difficult. At first, he dreamed of fog rolling through narrow streets, of bridges stretching endlessly over black rivers. Then he began to dream of footsteps, heavy, deliberate, always behind him. When he turned, no one was there. He woke with his heart racing, his throat dry, his notebook open beside his bed, as if he had written in his sleep. Strange lines appeared across the pages, shapes he could not recall drawing. They looked like paths, like bridges, like maps to nowhere. Still, he pressed forward. He carried a small recorder everywhere, capturing every interview, every sound. He played them back at night, listening for details he might have missed. But one evening, as he listened to the tape of the old woman's voice, something new emerged. Between her words, faint but certain, was a whisper. At first, he thought it was static. He rewound, played again. The whisper grew clearer. It was a voice, low and calm, speaking his name. He froze, staring at the recorder as the sound repeated. His own name, spoken in a tone he did not recognize. He had been alone when he made that recording. The woman had spoken of her brother, of the night he vanished, but she had never said his name. Yet here it was, whispered in the darkness, etched into the tape. He tried another recording, the soldier's testimony. Again, hidden under the man's rough voice, came the whisper, his name, soft as breath, curling around the words like fog. He checked the priest's interview. The same. Always his name, always the same tone, always impossible. The investigator wrote in his notes that the bridge had noticed him. He admitted he felt drawn toward it, as if his feet longed to follow the path into mist. He confessed to hearing his name when he closed his eyes, to feeling footsteps behind him in every empty room. He wrote that he feared sleep, for each dream carried him closer to the planks, closer to the silence. Yet his obsession deepened. He believed the bridge held answers, not only to the vanishing travelers, but to the nature of death itself. He told himself he could resist its call. That knowledge was worth the risk. His notes, however, betrayed another truth. The more he wrote, the more his words lost order. Sentences broke apart. Phrases repeated themselves. In one place, entire lines were filled with his own name, scrawled over and over until the ink bled through the page. And then the recordings changed again. Late one night, he played back the tape of his own thoughts, a habit he had formed to capture fleeting ideas. For several minutes, it was only his voice, calm, measured, reasoning through the puzzle. Then came silence. And after the silence, another whisper, but this time it was not his name. It was a single phrase, a phrase that chilled him to bone. Come across. The words were soft, almost gentle, but they carried weight. They were not a plea, they were a command. He stopped the tape, hands trembling, heart racing in his chest. Alone in his room, he felt the air grow heavy. He listened, straining for any sound beyond the machine. The silence pressed against him, thick and endless. And then in the stillness, he thought he heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving toward him. He turned. The room was empty, yet the sound remained in his ears, as real as the pounding of his own heart. From that night onward, the investigator's notes became scattered, desperate. He wrote of the bridge waiting for him, calling for him. He admitted he could not resist much longer. He spoke of whispers curling through his thoughts even in daylight, of shadows following him though no one was there. He confessed he no longer trusted his own mind. And so the man who had come to uncover the truth found himself caught in the very snare he sought to expose. His rational mind, trained to explain and to solve, was no match for the silence that crept through the bridge nor for the whispers that slipped into his life. The more he sought answers, the more the mystery consumed him, until he realized the truth was not a puzzle to be solved at all. It was a hunger, and the bridge had chosen him. There are places where night feels heavier than day, where silence grows so thick that it presses against the skin like a weight. The Romanian bridge was one of those places. By day it already seemed unnatural, but by night it became something else entirely. Shadows deepened, fog rose from the water like living breath, and the air itself seemed to wait. It was under those conditions that a team of researchers came, determined to capture the truth of what lingered there. They arrived with equipment, not crosses or prayers. Cameras with infrared lenses, motion sensors, electromagnetic detectors, recorders that could capture the faintest sound. They told themselves that technology could pierce through fear, that data could strip away the veil of superstition. For them, the bridge was not a curse or a legend. It was an experiment. The team worked as the sun fell, placing cameras at every angle. One at the mouth of the bridge, another facing from the far side, several hidden in the trees. Wires stretched like veins through the undergrowth, feeding into monitors glowing pale in the dark. Sensors measured temperature and movement, their small lights blinking like eyes in the night. The air grew colder as they worked, but they ignored it, blaming the forest for its damp chill. By the time darkness swallowed the valley, the equipment was ready. At first, everything seemed calm. The monitors showed the bridge, quiet and still. The detectors hummed gently, recording normal readings. The forest seemed empty, though the mist had begun to thicken, rising slowly from the river below. Hours passed in uneasy silence. Then something changed. The first sign was the temperature. The sensor nearest the bridge recorded a sudden drop, from cool autumn air to a biting chill. The numbers fell too fast, like the descent of a storm that never touched the sky. The researchers checked their instruments, but the readings were real. The air itself was growing colder, colder still, until frost began to form along the railing of the bridge. The cameras caught the fog moving strangely. It rolled forward in waves, creeping across the planks, swallowing them in pale white. But it was not the natural rise of mist from the river. It moved against the wind. Where the trees bent one way, the fog slid the other, curling with a will of its own. Shapes began to form within it. Shadows tall and thin, drifting across the bridge though no one was there. One researcher leaned closer to the screen, pointing out the movement. The shapes did not sway like mist. They walked, step by step. Faint silhouettes advanced into fog, their outlines broken and blurred but human in form. Some seemed to carry something, long shapes, like rifles slung across their shoulders. Others seemed to move in groups, marching in rhythm. The team watched in silence as the shadows crossed the bridge, disappearing into the far side, vanishing into nothing. The detectors began to sound. Electromagnetic spikes shot upward, rising far beyond normal levels. The machines recorded waves of energy, pulsing in intervals like the beat of a hidden heart. The researchers stared as the readings grew higher and higher, as if the bridge itself had awakened. They whispered among themselves, trying to reason through the impossible. Some said it was the earth, releasing stored energy. Others said it was a sign of a storm. But no storm touched the sky. Above the valley, the stars still shone, clear and distant. The energy pulses became stronger, shaking the monitors, filling the air with a faint hum. The cameras flickered, struggling to keep their image. On one feed, the mist bent into a spiral, twisting like a whirlpool in the air. For a second, the spiral flashed with faint light, a glow too quick for the eye but caught by the camera. It looked like a doorway, forming and breaking within the fog. The researchers leaned close, breath held, eyes wide. It was not superstition now. It was science, data, images that could not be denied. The bridge was not only cursed, it was alive with forces they could not understand. Then came the sound. At first, it was a whisper. The recorders picked it up, soft as a breath of wind. Words, faint, almost human. The team strained to listen. Some thought they heard names. Others heard commands. The volume rose, growing into a chorus, a tide of voices layered upon one another, speaking in tones no machine could fully capture. It was not only sound, It was pressure pressing against ears, sinking into the chest, vibrating through the bones. One of the researchers stood, his eyes fixed on a monitor, but his expression was distant, as if the voices pulled at him from somewhere far away. He reached for his flashlight, though no one told him to. Slowly, he moved toward the bridge. The others called after him, but his steps did not falter. The cameras caught him clearly, his body outlined against the glow of equipment, his breath clouding in the frozen air. The monitors showed his figure growing smaller as he approached the bridge. The fog curled tighter around him, clinging to his clothes, wrapping him in pale tendrils. The sensors spiked again, alarms blaring, lights flashing. The energy surged so high that the detectors burned out one by one, their screens going black. Still, he walked forward. The others shouted, but their voices seemed swallowed by the night. He stepped onto the first plank. The wood groaned, the sound carrying across the valley. The cameras caught every detail, his shoes pressing down, the railing trembling. He moved farther, the mist closing around him. His flashlight beam pierced only a few feet ahead before fading into white. The team watched helplessly as he vanished deeper, until only the glow of his light remained. Then even that glow began to flicker, dimming, breaking apart. The monitors crackled with static, their images trembling, shaking, breaking into black lines across the screen. The last thing they saw was his figure turning, as though glancing back toward them. His mouth opened, though no sound came. His body blurred, stretched, swallowed by the fog. Then the image broke. The monitors erupted into static, filling the room with the hiss of broken signal. The recorder screeched, overwhelmed by waves of sound. The lights on the sensors burst, plunging the room into half-darkness. For long minutes, the team struggled, resetting, rewiring, desperate to recover the image. Finally, one camera cleared. The static faded. The picture returned. The bridge was empty. The fog rolled gently across its planks, calm as before. The railing stood unbroken. The path stretched on, silent and still. But the researcher was gone. His flashlight was gone. His footsteps left no mark. There was nothing left, no trace he had ever stood there at all. The team sat in silence, eyes fixed on the screen, hearts pounding. Some refused to speak. Others whispered prayers. The machines remained dead, their readings frozen at impossible levels, proof that something had happened beyond reason. Yet the cameras showed nothing but mist. Later, when the recordings were studied, strange details emerged. Frames that should have shown empty air instead revealed faint shapes. Hands reaching, faces blurred, figures half-formed in the fog. In one moment, frozen on tape, the missing researcher's face appeared in the mist, mouth open, eyes wide, staring directly into the lens. And then it was gone. The footage became infamous among those who studied the paranormal. Scientists dismissed it, calling it error, distortion, failure of equipment. But those who watched it closely, those who listened to the whispers beneath the static, knew the truth. The bridge had claimed another, and as always, it left nothing behind. There are many strange things about the Romanian bridge, but what unsettles researchers most is not the vanishings, not even the voices in the fog. It is the bridge's shape itself, the way it stands against the world, defying the simple rules of geometry. For centuries, no one noticed. Villagers saw only cursed wood and fog. Soldiers saw only a path across a river. But when experts finally turned their eyes to the structure, when they began to measure, to map, to compare, they discovered that the bridge should not exist. The first signs came from something simple. Surveyors walked its length with measuring tape. In the daylight, under the pale sun, the bridge stretched a little over 20 meters. A short span, barely worth a mention. But when the same surveyors returned at night, guided by lanterns, their measurements told a different story. Step by step, the length stretched farther. Their tape reached beyond 20 meters, then 25, then 30. It was the same bridge, the same planks beneath their boots, yet the numbers betrayed them. The bridge was longer in the dark than in the day. Confused, they repeated the test again and again. Each time, the result remained. By daylight, the span seemed short, almost ordinary. But under the cover of night, when the mist rolled heavy and the air grew colder, the bridge unfolded itself, stretching into impossible length. Those who walked it said the journey felt endless, as though the other side kept retreating. Some swore the bridge grew beneath their feet. Others claimed the river widened as they walked. Whatever the reason, the truth was plain. This was no normal structure. Then came the maps. Military scouts marked its location carefully, plotting coordinates on charts. But when their maps were compared, nothing aligned. One placed the bridge deeper in the forest. Another set it farther downstream. When these maps were overlaid, the paths twisted and crossed like tangled roots with no clear answer. Even modern satellite images failed. On some days, the bridge appeared shorter, hugging the banks. On others, it stretched farther, vanishing into the trees. Sometimes, it disappeared entirely, leaving only empty water. Scientists blamed the mist, the angle of the satellites, interference. But no excuse explained the way lines bent around that place, as if the land itself shifted to hide the truth. Engineers tried to study the angles. They drew diagrams of the planks, the beams, the supports. At first, the drawings looked simple, but as they added detail, something strange appeared. The angles refused to settle. Beams that should have met cleanly at 90 degrees instead bent into impossible shapes. The supports did not match the size of the planks they carried. The whole structure seemed to tilt slightly inward, like a mouth drawing breath. The more precise the measurements, the less sense they made. Some lines bent in directions no hand could draw, no eye could follow. One young architect, fascinated, tried to sketch the bridge by memory. He spent hours with pencil and ruler, capturing every curve, every line. But when he stepped back to examine his work, he froze. The drawing seemed to move, not quickly, not in plain sight, but with a slow, dreadful crawl. The angles shifted when he looked away. A line that had been straight now bowed inward. A support that leaned one way seemed to lean the other. He tore the page to pieces, swearing never to try again. Days later, he confessed he could not sleep. For every time he closed his eyes, he saw the lines twisting, writhing, reaching. Other villagers told the same. Those who tried to sketch the bridge on scraps of paper woke in terror, convinced the shapes were alive. Some claimed the drawings whispered in the dark, the lines curling into words they could not understand. Few dared to attempt it more than once. The bridge refused to be captured, even by ink. Experts compared the structure to known geometry, to architecture across the world. None of it matched. The bridge was not Roman, though some thought it ancient. It was not Gothic, though its shadows carried that weight. It was not modern, though parts of it seemed freshly cut. Its floor belonged to no culture, no era, no style. It was as if the bridge did not come from the hands of men at all, but from something else, something that built with rules unknown to this world. The strangest discovery came from ground surveys. A team of geologists mapped the land beneath the river. Hoping to understand how the bridge was anchored, they sent instruments deep into the soil, charting every layer of earth and stone. But when they compared the results, they found nothing solid beneath the supports. No bedrock, no firm ground. Instead, their data showed gaps, empty spaces, voids where the earth should have been. It was as if the bridge did not rest upon the land at all. The realization spread slowly, chilling every voice that spoke it aloud. The bridge was not built on the land. It was built through it. Those words carried weight heavier than stone. If true, then the bridge was not merely a structure. It was a passage, not across the river, but through reality itself. Each step upon its planks was not a step forward, but a step deeper. The shifting maps, the stretching length, the impossible angles, all were signs of a doorway, a path cut into the fabric of the world. Villagers nodded when they heard this conclusion. They had always known, though they lacked the language of geometry. To them, the bridge was a wound in the earth, and wounds do not heal. They spoke of ancestors who had warned never to disturb the place. They spoke of voices that slipped through the cracks, whispering in the night. They spoke of shadows that moved against the wind, stretching from another side. And now the scientists confirmed what the villagers had always believed. The bridge did not belong. But what lay through it? That was a question none could answer. The diary found near the bridge spoke of a place where the sky glowed red, where shapes moved in silence. Survivors of dreams claimed they walked endless planks, never reaching land. The whispers spoke in voices of the lost, luring the living to follow. If the bridge was built through the world, then perhaps it led not to another shore, but to another realm, a realm hungry for those who stepped too far. Even experts who dismissed superstition found themselves uneasy. One admitted in his notes that he could not look at his diagrams without feeling sick. Another swore his compass spun when placed near the bridge, as if north itself bent away. A third confessed he dreamed of standing on the planks, the geometry beneath his feet twisting, pulling, folding space around him like paper. And so the cursed geometry of the bridge became its most unsettling truth. Not the vanishings, not the voices, not even the lights that hovered in the mist. It was a knowledge that every line of the bridge bent wrong, every angle twisted towards something unseen. It was a thought that the bridge was not meant to carry travelers across water, but to deliver them elsewhere. To this day, no map captures it, no drawing holds it, no measurement agrees with the next. The bridge resists every attempt to be defined, as though geometry itself cannot bind it. And those who walk its planks know the truth in their bones. Each step carries them not forward, but through. And once through, there may be no way back. For centuries, the Romanian bridge was known only as a place where travelers vanished. People crossed into the fog and never returned. Families grieved. Villagers whispered. Researchers debated. The bridge consumed all, leaving behind silence. But then came a stranger truth, because there are rare accounts of people who claimed they crossed to the other side and somehow came back. At first, their words seemed like miracles, survivors of the impossible, witnesses to what lay beyond. But when investigators searched for records of their past, they found nothing. No birth certificates, no family records, no trace of who they were before the bridge. It was as if they had never existed in this world until they stepped out of the fog. Survivors who should have been living proof instead became riddles wrapped in flesh. The first appeared in the early 20th century. A man wandered into a Romanian village one autumn night, barefoot, his clothes torn and covered in strange red dust. His skin was pale, his eyes hollow, and his voice trembled as he spoke of the bridge. He said he had crossed against the warnings. Driven by curiosity, he described the planks stretching farther than his steps, the mist swallowing the world around him. He spoke of how the river beneath him disappeared, replaced by something else. On the other side, he said, was a land that did not belong to Earth. The sky burned red, glowing with a light that came from no sun. The ground trembled, not with life but with whispers, as though the earth itself was alive with voices. Shadows moved in the distance, tall shapes that bent wrong, that swayed though no wind touched them. He said the air hummed, a sound that filled his skull, vibrating against his bones until he thought he would break apart. When asked what he saw in that world, he said he saw cities, ruins made of black stone, towering arches carved with symbols that shifted when he looked too long. He said he heard laughter, faint at first, then louder, echoing across the burning sky. He ran, desperate to escape, but every direction carried him deeper. Only when he turned back and found the bridge again did he stumble across, collapsing at its mouth. His tale spread quickly, yet no one could find proof of who he was. He gave a name, but no village claimed him. No family came forward. No record matched. Even his language seemed strange, an accent no one could place. It was as if the man had been born from the bridge itself, carried out of the mist like an echo made flesh, and his body began to fail. Within days, his skin grew brittle, cracking like old parchment. His hair fell away in clumps. He complained of pain in his chest, as though something inside him pressed escape. Doctors could do nothing. They said his blood seemed thin, his organs weak, as though his body was not built for this world. Within a week, he was gone, his skin collapsing in folds, his bones brittle as ash. His body did not rot in the usual way. It crumbled, leaving little more than dust that scattered with the wind. Others followed through the years. A woman was found in the 1950s, wandering near the bridge in tattered clothes. She spoke of red skies and endless whispers. Her eyes darted constantly, as if she saw shadows others could not. She claimed she had crossed with others, but none returned with her. Like the man before her, no record proved she existed before. No family name, no papers, no history. Investigators pressed her for details. She drew maps of the place she had seen, maps that spiraled into impossible shapes. She wrote words in languages unknown, letters that shifted when studied too long. And she too began to deteriorate. Her skin lost color. Her breath grew shallow. Her voice faded into whispers. In time, she too dissolved, her body breaking apart until nothing remained. Each time, the survivors told the same things. A red sky, whispers in the air, cities of black stone, shapes that moved wrong, laughter that echoed without end, and always the bridge, standing behind them, waiting for their return. They said the bridge was not simply a path, but a door, and the other side was hungry. The climax came with a man in the 1970s. He was found by a research team near the forest, his clothes strange, his body trembling, his eyes wild. He begged for water, for warmth, for someone to listen. He said he had crossed and returned, though he remembered little of who he was before. Investigators took him in, recording every word. He described the red world again, but this time he added something darker. He said he had seen faces in the stone. The walls themselves held the visages of those who had crossed before, their mouths open in silent screams, their eyes watching him as he ran. He said he felt himself pulled into stone, as though he too would become part of it. Only the bridge saved him, though he did not know why. The researchers noted that his body was breaking down quickly, faster than the others. His skin sagged, his voice rasped, his hands shook violently. They placed him in a chair, asking questions, desperate to record more. As he answered, his voice broke into static, his words dissolving into whispers that came from nowhere. He gripped the table, eyes wide, and shouted that they were calling him back. His chest heaved, his bones rattled beneath his skin, and then before their eyes, his body crumbled. His skin flaked away, his flesh dissolved into dust, his bones collapsed into powder. Within seconds, the chair was empty. Only dust remained, rising gently into the air before falling still. The men who witnessed it never spoke the same again. Some refused to return to the forest. Others swore they could hear whispers at night, the same voices the survivor described. A few swore they saw him again, not in flesh but in the mist above the bridge, his face stretched, his mouth open, whispering. From then on, survivors were not welcomed. They were feared. Villagers believed they were not people at all, but fragments of the other world, sent back to tempt the living. They said the bridge created them, shadows wearing human skin, and that their crumbling bodies proved they did not belong. Some even claimed that allowing them to speak brought curses upon the listeners, binding them closer to the bridge's call. And so the survivors who never were became part of the legend. Not proof, but warning. Proof would mean records, families, lives lived before. These had none. They emerged from the mist as if born from it, spoke of a red world beyond, and then dissolved before they could reveal more. It is said that their words still linger in the valley. Some villagers whisper that if you walk close enough to the bridge, you can hear them speaking in the fog, telling of the world beyond, begging for release, warning of the hunger that waits on the other side. Others say they are not warnings at all, but traps, voices made to lure the living to join them. Whatever the truth, the fact remains. The bridge takes, and sometimes it gives back. But what it returns is never whole, never right, never human for long. Survivors who never were, shadows that crumble into dust. For centuries, the bridge was whispered about as cursed ground, a place where souls vanished and voices called through fog. Folklore wrapped itself around its planks. Priests prayed against it, and villagers avoided its path. But in the last century, when science began to turn its eye upon the bridge, a new theory emerged. A theory colder than any legend, stranger than any superstition. Some scientists began to suspect the bridge was not cursed at all. It was something far more terrifying. A doorway, a dimensional rift, a gateway that fed on those who dared to cross. The idea began quietly. buried in the notebooks of researchers who dared to measure the impossible angles. They noticed how the bridge stretched longer at night, how its map shifted from one study to another. They compared notes from survivors who had described a red sky and humming air beyond. Piece by piece, a picture formed that did not match any earthly explanation. If the bridge was not built on the land, but through it, then where did it lead? To answer that question, scientists began to build simulations, using reports of electromagnetic spikes, sudden drops in temperature, and strange distortions in sound. They fed data into their machines. The results shocked them. The models showed the bridge bending not only space, but reality itself. A fracture, a tear in the fabric of this world. According to the simulations, anyone who crossed did not simply vanish. They were pulled into another dimension. But the most chilling part was what the models predicted about the other side. The data suggested it was not a world like ours. It was a collapsed place, broken and decaying, a realm where life had long ago died. A world searching for new life to consume. The bridge was not only a doorway, but a mouth, pulling the living into a realm that hungered to replace what it had lost. The scientists argued over their results. Some dismissed them as errors, distortions caused by fog and faulty instruments. But others stared too long at the numbers, too deep into the models, and found themselves convinced. They said the whispers were not ghosts, but echoes from another dimension, reaching across a rift. They said the red sky and crumbling stone were not visions of madness, but glimpses of that dead world beyond. They said the bridge was not cursed, it was alive. Then came the samples. A team collected fragments from planks, scraping away bits of the wood and dust clinging to its frame. At first, the samples looked ordinary, splinters of oak, soil damp from the river. But when placed under powerful microscopes, strange particles appeared, shapes that twisted in patterns no element on Earth ever formed. Their structures bent in ways that defied the laws of chemistry, folding and unfolding, shifting even when frozen under glass. Tests revealed impossible results. The particles carried energy signatures unlike any known substance. Some glowed faintly under radiation. Others seemed to absorb light, swallowing a whole. When compared against catalogs of Earth's natural elements, the answer was always the same. No match. These particles did not belong to this world. They were something else, something foreign, something that had crossed the rift. The discovery shook the researchers. If the bridge was a gateway, then pieces of the other world were bleeding into ours, carried like spores into the air. And if that was true, then perhaps the opposite was also happening. People who vanished were not only swallowed but transformed, absorbed into that alien dimension as fuel. The more they studied, the more disturbing the evidence became. Instruments placed near the bridge recorded rhythmic pulses, bursts of energy that repeated in intervals. At first, the scientists thought it random, but over time, they realized the pattern was deliberate, like a heartbeat. The bridge pulsed with life, steady and constant, as though the rift itself was alive, breathing through its planks. The fog, the whispers, the stretching length, all were symptoms of a living gateway. One researcher wrote that the bridge reminded him of a predator. It did not attack outright. It waited, it lured, it whispered, it drew the curious close, tempting them to step forward. And once they did, it fed. The villagers had always said the bridge was hungry, but now, science gave their fears a new language. The data suggested the bridge did not simply trap souls for eternity. It consumed them, their energy, their matter. Their very existence was drawn into the rift, sustaining whatever waited beyond. That explained why survivors deteriorated. They did not belong here because they were no longer entirely human. They were fragments, pulled through, reshaped by the hunger of that world, and then thrown back only to crumble. The climax came when the theory was tested with a small probe. A machine was sent halfway across the bridge, designed to measure gravity, light, and energy. For the first meters, the readings were steady, but as the probe reached the center, the data spiked. Gravity twisted, light bent, electromagnetic readings soared to impossible heights. The final transmission showed an image blurred beyond recognition, as though the lens itself was melting. And then silence. The probe was gone. When the cables were reeled back, they were cut cleanly, as though severed by invisible teeth. The scientists concluded what villagers had whispered all along. The bridge was not cursed. It was hungry. It fed on travelers, on animals, on machines, pulling them into a dimension where a collapsed world waited. Not a land of the dead, but a land that had died. A place that sought to fill its emptiness with whatever stepped too close. Even those who rejected superstition felt their blood run cold at the thought. A bridge that was not truly a structure, but a living rift. A passage that consumed life to sustain itself. It explained everything. The vanishing patrols, the survivors who never were, the strange geometry, the voices that whispered in the night. The bridge was not a doorway to anywhere. It was a predator disguised as a path. And still it waits. Through war, through centuries, through prayers and science, it stands unchanged. Its planks rot, but never collapse. Its angles twist, but never break. Its hunger endures. Those who cross are not lost. They are consumed. And the bridge, silent and patient, waits for its next step, its next offering. For centuries, the bridge had been patient. It had waited in silence, hidden in mist, claiming one traveler at a time. A shepherd here, a soldier there, a curious wanderer who ignored the warnings. It had always fed slowly, carefully, so as not to draw too much attention. But hunger cannot stay hidden forever. And one winter, the bridge began to change. The first sign came as tremors. Small at first, so light that villagers thought it was a shifting of frozen soil. But soon the earth began to shake with a force that rattled windows and split the ground. Pots fell from shelves, walls groaned, and animals bolted in terror. At the center of it all, the bridge stood, trembling as though waking from a long sleep. The planks groaned under a weight that was not there. The railing creaked like old bones stretching after centuries of silence. At night, the villagers felt dread creep deeper. In their homes, behind barred doors and shuttered windows, they began to hear voices. Not faint whispers in the forest, but cries inside their very walls. Mothers swore they heard the laughter of lost children echoing in their kitchens. Husbands heard the voices of wives who had been gone for decades. Some even heard their own names called in the dark, spoken in tones both loving and cruel. The bridge no longer stayed in the valley. It carried itself into their dreams, into their rooms, into their very thoughts. One woman woke screaming that she had seen her father standing at the foot of her bed, but her father had vanished on the bridge 50 years earlier. Another villager refused to sleep at all, terrified that if he closed his eyes, he would wake not in his home, but standing on the planks. Fear spread like sickness, and with it came the sense that the bridge was not waiting for visitors anymore. It was reaching outward. Researchers stationed near the site recorded strange readings. The electromagnetic pulses that once spiked and burst now roared in constant waves. Their instruments burned out, screens shattering under the strain. Compasses spun madly, maps twisted, and the very air grew heavy. They reported the forest bending unnaturally, trees leaning toward the river, roots straining as if pulled by invisible hands. At night, they heard the cries too. At first, they dismissed them as tricks of exhaustion, but soon the voices grew so loud they drowned out their thoughts. Some swore they saw shadows moving in their tents, stretching over their faces, whispering in languages they could not understand. Then came the moment no one could deny. It began with a roar deep beneath the ground. The earth cracked open, sending birds screaming into the sky. The river swelled as if pulled by unseen tides. And the bridge groaned louder than ever before, a sound that shook the valley like thunder. Villagers clutched each other, convinced the earth itself was breaking apart. From the edge of the forest, witnesses saw something no words could prepare them for. The bridge pulled, not with ropes or machines, but with a force that bent the world around it. Trees nearest the river shook violently, their roots tearing free from the soil, dragged across the ground. Branches snapped, trunks split, and one by one, they were pulled toward the bridge, vanishing into mist. Animals ran in panic, but those closest found their legs failing, their bodies sliding across the earth as if caught in a current. Deer, wolves, even birds in flight were pulled downward, swallowed before they could cry out. The researchers fled, stumbling to the forest, their equipment abandoned. But even as they ran, the air itself fought them. They felt pressure dragging at their chests, pulling their breath from their lungs. The wind bent unnaturally, rushing toward a bridge, as if even the sky was being devoured. They gasped for air, clutching their throats, terrified they would be pulled in like everything else. In the village, panic spread. Children clung to their mothers, men shouted prayers, and elders swore this was the end. The bridge, they said, was no longer content with travelers. It wanted the village. It wanted all. Amid the chaos, a desperate plan took shape. For years, the villagers had avoided the bridge, never daring to harm it, never daring to disturb what they thought could not be defeated. But now, with the earth splitting and the cries of the vanished echoing in their homes, they had no choice. They would destroy it. Men gathered fuel, oil, and fire. Some brought explosives left hidden since the war. They whispered that even if it cost them their lives, they could not allow the bridge to consume their world. The researchers, shaken but determined, joined them. Together, they devised a plan. They would set charges along the planks and supports, collapsing the bridge into the river. If it was truly built through the land, if it truly fed, then perhaps burying it beneath stone and water would end the hunger. As night fell, the villagers stood at the forest's edge, watching the bridge through the mist. It seemed larger now, stretched unnaturally across the river. Its planks pulsed faintly, glowing with a sick light. The cries of the vanished grew louder, now more than whispers. They rose like a chorus, calling, begging, laughing. Some villagers nearly broke, stumbling forward in a trance, only to be dragged back by others. They knew the bridge was trying to protect itself. It wanted them to come willingly, to step forward as so many had before. But this time, the villagers carried fire. This time, they carried destruction. They moved in silence, torches low, charges strapped to their backs. The air pressed against them, heavy and cold, but they pressed forward. Each step felt like walking into a storm that pushed against their skin. The bridge creaked as if it knew, as if it sensed the danger. The cries grew frantic, filling the night, shaking the bones of every man and woman who heard them. Still, they placed the charges. Still, they poured the oil. Some whispered prayers, others cursed, but all worked with hands that trembled. The planks beneath them felt alive, vibrating, bending under their weight. Shadows danced across the mist, shapes of the lost moving in the corners of their vision. One man screamed that he saw his dead wife smiling at him from the railing, her hand reaching out. He dropped his torch, fallen to his knees, and had to be dragged away. The bridge was fighting back with every trick it had. At last, the final charge was placed. The villagers and researchers stumbled back, hearts pounding, ears ringing with voices that would not stop. The leader of the group held the detonator in shaking hands. For a moment, no one breathed. The cries reached a fever pitch, a wall of sound that felt like knives in the air. The bridge groaned, splitting with cracks that echoed like thunder. The earth beneath them shook, and the river rose high, frothing like a beast. And then, with a single press, the charges ignited. Flames roared into the night, a wall of fire engulfing the planks. The bridge screamed, not with breaking, not stone falling, but sound deeper, darker, like the howl of something alive. Explosions rocked the valley, sending shockwaves through the air. The structure collapsed piece by piece, falling into the churning river below. The cries of the vanished rose into a single piercing wail, then faded as the last beam cracked and vanished into the water. When the fire died, silence returned. The river flowed black beneath the stars. The villagers stood in shock, staring at the empty space where the bridge had been. For the first time in centuries, the path was gone, but silence can be deceptive. And as the people turned back to their homes, some swore they still heard faint whispers in the wind. Not loud, not clear, but present, waiting. For now, the bridge was gone. But hunger does not die so easily. The night was heavy with silence, the kind that presses against the chest and slows the breath. The villagers had destroyed the bridge once before, or so they thought, but the whispers returned and the fear never left. Fires had burned, Explosives had torn the planks, yet still it stood. Every dream, every shadow, every cry in the night told him the hunger was not gone. It was only waiting. And then came the man who would attempt the last crossing. He was not a villager, though he carried their fear in his heart. He was a detective, a seeker of truth, one who had listened to too many voices, studied too many notes, seen too many vanishings. He had watched the bridge claim others. He had played back the recordings where whispers spoke his name. His obsession had grown into something unshakable. He no longer sought to understand. He sought to end it. He carried explosives strapped to his back, the same kind that once shattered stone in the mountains. His plan was simple: walk to the heart of the bridge, place the charges, and destroy it from within. Yet no one believed he would return. The villagers begged him to turn back. Some wept, others prayed. He only nodded, his face pale in the torchlight, and walked forward. The night air clung cold to his skin. Mist rose thick from the river, swallowing the planks in pale white. Each step he took echoed like thunder, a sound too loud for a single man, though it groaned beneath him, stretching like something alive. He walked slowly, deliberately, his boots steady against the pull of the unseen. The whispers began almost at once. At first they were faint, drifting like distant memories. Then they grew louder, layering one over another, dozens of voices calling at once. Some spoke his name. Others begged him to stop. Some laughed. Some wept. The closer he came to the center, the louder they grew, until the air shook with sound. His breath caught in his throat, but his steps never faltered. The fog closed tighter, curling around his body, blinding his sight. He could not see the villagers behind him. He could not see the far side ahead. All that existed was the planks beneath his boots, the voices pressing against his skull, and the thrum of the bridge itself, a pulse like a heartbeat rising from the wood. He reached the middle and knelt, his hands trembling as he set the charges. Each click of metal echoed as though the bridge itself listened. The whispers rose into a crescendo, a wall of sound pressing from every side. His eyes burned, his ears rang, yet his fingers worked quickly, planting the last charge deep into the cracks. When he rose to his feet, the bridge shook beneath him, not from his weight, but from something greater. The planks trembled, the rails shuddered, the mist thickened until it was almost solid. He stood tall, his chest heaving, and reached for the detonator. In that moment, the whispers broke into a single voice. It was not angry. It was not pleading. It was calm, deep, endless. It told him to stop. It promised that if he left, if he turned back, no one else would vanish. It promised peace. For a heartbeat, his hand froze. His eyes closed. The villagers later swore the fog swirled around him like arms, holding him still. But then he pressed. The night exploded in fire. The charges tore through the planks, sending shockwaves across the valley. Flames shot upward, splitting the mist with roaring light. The bridge screamed, not wood, not stone, but something deeper, like the howl of a living beast torn apart. The ground shook, the river rose, the forest echoed with thunder. Villagers covered their ears, falling to their knees, as the bridge collapsed in a storm of splinters and flame. And then, silence. The fog thinned, the flames burned out, the valley fell still. Where once the bridge stretched, only empty water remained. The detective was gone, claimed with it. No trace of him, no trace of the charges, nothing but smoke drifting on the river's surface. The villagers stood in awe, hearts pounding, tears on their faces. For the first time in memory, the bridge was gone. They returned to their homes with hope in their hearts, whispering that the curse was finally broken. They slept, some for the first time in years, convinced the hunger had been ended by the man's sacrifice. But dawn brings truth. When the sun rose, its pale light cut across the valley. The villagers returned to see the ruins, to confirm what they had witnessed. They pushed through the trees, stepping onto the banks of the river. And there it was, the bridge, perfect, untouched, not a splinter missing, not a mark of fire or blast. Its planks were whole, its rails straight, its mist curling gently as if nothing had happened. It stood as it had for centuries, silent and patient, waiting. The villagers wept, some in despair, some in fury. They realized the truth that morning. The bridge could not be destroyed. Fire could not burn it. Explosives could not break it. Time could not decay it. The bridge was not a structure. It was not wood, not stone, not metal. It was a wound in the world, eternal and endless, feeding and waiting. The detective was gone, swallowed like the rest. His sacrifice, his courage, his final act, all had been consumed. And yet, the bridge remained, as if mocking the living, as if reminding them that hunger never dies. And still it waits. The villagers live with its shadow. They warn their children never to go near. They lock their doors at night when the fog rolls heavy. They whisper that the cries of the vanished can still be heard if you listen closely. But deep down, they know the bridge does not sleep. It does not rest. It waits for footsteps. For centuries, people have asked the same question. What lies beyond? A cursed land? A collapsed world? A dimension feeding on life? Or nothing at all? None who cross return to answer. Only fragments, whispers, dust. And yet, the bridge stands. It waits for the bold, for the curious, for the desperate. It waits for those who believe they will be the one to solve its riddle, the one to conquer its hunger. It waits for those who think they can return. It waits for the next step, the next breath, the next soul. Would you cross? If this story haunted you, if it kept you watching until the last word, then remember, there are countless tales like this hidden in the cracks of our world. Cursed places, forbidden lands, forgotten cities. Places where mystery still breathes, where danger and wonder are one. Share this story with those who love the shadows. Subscribe for more legends whisper from the edge of the unknown. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Would you step onto the bridge and no return, or would you turn away? The bridge is waiting.